I'm going to go ahead and do this, and feel free to cut it up. I'm probably going to do this in little sections, so at least in like regular standard breaking points, so feel free to cut wherever you need to. All right. Welcome to the auditor training for HOS. I just want to run you through the basics of what you should be looking for, the rules that apply, and some exceptions that you might run into when auditing logs. So we'll jump right in. The FMCSA, under pressure to cut down on accidents and fatalities involving trucks and commercial carriers, began tracking data to identify ways to reduce these issues. After some study, they attributed a sizable portion of the crashes to driver fatigue. To cut down on driver fatigue, they implemented means of tracking driver activity as well as limits on these activities. Logs, or records of duty status, RODS, are the way that drivers track their daily activities. Each driver is required, except for some very specific exemptions, to complete a daily log, which shows what they've done that day. These logs have been in various forms, but are primarily in either paper log or electronic log form now. Nowadays, you're seeing pretty much everybody on ELD after December 17th of 2017. But there are still some folks out there on AOBRDs and paper logs, so keep that in mind. All logs contain several necessary pieces of information. Each paper log needs to contain the following things. It needs to contain the name of the driver and their signature, the name and address of the terminal out of which the driver is operating, at least the city and state. It doesn't need to have the actual physical address, but at least it needs to have the city and state that the driver was operating out of. Now, keep in mind when auditing that that might be different than the terminal, the actual main terminal of the company. So if a driver operates out of their house, they might be in a different time zone than the main logs that you're auditing for that terminal, so keep that in mind. You also need the name of the co-driver if applicable. So obviously if you don't have a co-driver, you don't need their name on there. The shipping document number or name of the shipper and commodity, truck and trailer number, the grid with the daily activities tracked, and total hours, as well as remarks. All of those need to be complete and legible for it to be a valid log. And legible is important, especially when using paper log, because we've all seen some people's handwriting out there that isn't good enough, and you need to make sure that those people are writing in a legible fashion, or else it could be considered a form and manner violation. The driver's activities are divided into 4 basic categories. These are the ones you see on the vast majority of logs, and there are some exceptions, and we'll talk about that shortly. Off-duty, this is any activity that's not work-related. So examples of this are eating at a restaurant, taking a walk, sleeping, something along those lines. These are not related to work. You're not being told by your employer what you're doing or when you're supposed to do it. You just are doing those things because it's your personal time. Sleeper berth, this is another off-duty activity, but this is very specifically defined as being in the sleeper berth of a truck that obviously has it. You don't have to be necessarily sleeping, but you do have to be in that berth. So you can't be in sleeper berth and in a restaurant if the DOT is getting particular in that case. Driving, obviously this is any time spent driving the truck for work purposes. Obviously there are other statuses that you can use when driving it for personal reasons, but this is under dispatch, under load, going back to the terminal, anything that involves working for the company. And then there's on-duty not driving. Now this is a very broad category, but it's basically anything work-related that isn't driving. So that's inspections, that's scales, that's maintenance on the vehicle, it's fueling especially, and that's important. It always has to be on duty. These are all very, it's a broad category, so there's lots of different things that can fit under there. Some other companies include other categories in their logs that you might see. One of these categories is yard move, so that's any time that you are at either a pickup drop-off yard or at your terminal yard, and you just need to move the truck for a little bit. Sometimes it's done by other people. You put the truck in yard move first, then you move it, and it doesn't count as an on-duty activity, so this is an off-duty activity. The other one that we see a lot is personal conveyance, or PC. What personal conveyance is using your vehicle as your personal driving vehicle. The rule was originally put in if you were at a truck stop and you needed to go to Walmart to get some soap or to get some food to a restaurant, something along those lines. And it is only to be used for personal reasons. You cannot further a load. The directions are vague, but it does specifically say you cannot use personal conveyance to further a load. That means you cannot get closer to your destination if you're under load. You can't get closer to a pickup point or a drop-off location. You can only use it for personal reasons. You can use it after your last drop-off to drive home, and you can also use it for other miscellaneous things like going to a friend's house or something like that. Let's say you're driving through Arizona and you have a friend that lives in Arizona and you're not under dispatch and you just feel like going and visiting them. You can put that in there as personal conveyance. It is an off-duty form of driving, which means you do not have to track it for hours of service, but you do need to say while you're driving that you were in personal conveyance, because if you don't, then an officer stopping you will just assume that you are driving without keeping track of your location. The problem, we're gonna, okay, so that's our first stop, and then we'll go back through and go to the next section.